I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, where my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence.
So you remember as a kid, you loved cereal. Maybe even as an adult, you love cereal, right? I remember as a kid, there was nothing better than sitting down in the morning with a box of cereal, and you'd sit the box of cereal right in front of you, and you just stare at the box of cereal. There's just something about a box of cereal that you just loved. Now, you can probably think of what was your favorite cereals as a kid? What were some of them? Captain Crunch. I knew that had to come out somewhere, of course. Cheerios. Lucky Charms. Oh. I hate those little marshmallows, but a lot of people love those. Lucky Charms. What else? Corn Flakes. Anything else? So, when you look at a box of cereal, what's great about it is, box of cereal has a lot of things on it, right? So when you look at this box of cereal, what does it tell you about Life cereal? It's original. The original Life cereal. As was Life cereal with strawberries or whatever. What else does it say? Quaker. See that guy, the Quaker, in 1877, whoever this guy was. What else? Ingredients. It does. If you look, it does tell you the ingredients that are inside all the healthy stuff, and the fine print is the non-healthy stuff. They don't want you to read that. That's Heart Smart. So, right? And so many times, even a box of cereal, this image of a box of cereal, Life cereal, I think most of Life cereal now has these 4 colors, actually, in Life cereal, and it is sort of the image of Life cereal, right? We also think of one of the great ones, Wheaties, saying, did you have your Wheaties this morning? What would be, the images about Wheaties is they give you strength, and they would put the picture of somebody many times on the box of Wheaties, especially athletes who had done very well, Olympic athletes who excel. One of the, the penultimate things you can have arrived at is to have your face on a box of Wheaties. I don't think you'll ever see my face on a box of Wheaties. However, so this morning I'm thinking about, it's an image of something, and we're talking about God. So we're going to make a box of cereal that represents God, all right? I am not an artist at all. So I need somebody to do some of the drawing for me. Maybe I'll put this into my 3 girls here who all are very artistic. You guys can share that responsibility. What I want you to do is I want you to call out some of the things that we should put on this box of cereal to represent God, that sort of draws attention to God. Just like Life cereal, hey, there's life in God. So what would be some things you're going to put on the box? Strength. Okay. You each have a color, right? Strength. All powerful. Okay. Tanya said you should have the cross there somewhere. Sovereign. Forgiving. Everlasting. Oh, boy. Remember, girls, this is portraying the image of God, so it should look good. All right? We're just writing words. Anything else? Somebody said put a cross. You can draw a cross on there. Pictures on there. What else should you?
Make a dove.
The dove. A loaf of bread. Anything else? Living water. This is going to be a beautiful box. Light of the world. Anything else? Again, in thinking, you're trying to, because just like the box of Life cereal, it does immediately, for those who see it, represents an image. It brings to mind something about that box of cereal. So as we're talking about God, we're looking at this box. What is it that's going to represent kind of who he is from an image standpoint, what he represents, what's inside, how it's good for us. You could even think, remember the boxes here that had the prizes in it? I don't know if they still do that, do they? You love that? Those are the best ones. Yeah, to eat all kinds of, parents were happy because you eat like 5 bowls of cereal just so you could get to the bottom and get the prize out of the box of cereal. A heart. Love. A heart. Creator. All right, anything else? Again, you want this box to kind of sort of be all-encompassing what it represents as far as God. People who see that box are going to say, hey, I know what that is. That's not life cereal. That's a God box. Right? Holy. Don't put a hole in it. Holy with an H. Holy. What'd you say? Merciful judge. Propitiation. No, I'm just kidding. All right. How's it looking, girls? Love, yep. Okay. Well, we can add some more to this as we go. Thank you, ladies, for, see now, if everybody saw this, you would immediately say what? It's a box. But what would you say about the box? It's a God box. Okay. So, this morning, remember, we are going through this study of the Ten Commandments. We started last week, the first commandment, which was what? Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Remember, we went through the words no, have no other gods before me. All of those representatives of things of what he's trying to say. And so this morning, we're going to go back to the book of Exodus. This is chapter 20 we're in. And we're going to go through the second commandment. Now, if somebody would read verses 4 through 6. Okay, so the second commandment, if someone were to paraphrase that into sort of a shorter version than all those, what would you say it is? In just a phrase. Don't worship anything but God. All right. Say again? No idols. And so we talked some last week about idols as far as what would we put before the Lord. And it's interesting, there was a Puritan preacher some years ago named Thomas Watson, and he said this about the commandments. And just like we talked about, the Ten Commandments are written in order for a very specific reason. And they sort of tie together. And he says when you look at the first two commandments, they're necessary because they sort of don't play off one another, but they follow, they sort of fit together. The first commandment forbids worshiping a false god. But some would say the second commandment forbids worshiping the true God in a false way. Or another way of saying it is the first commandment deals with who or whom we worship, and the second one deals with how we worship. And so you may say, well, wait a minute, just this not make any graven images or carved images, how is that how we worship? Well, we're going to talk about that because I think, worship is this thing that's this big, huge sort of concept we talk about in Christendom, but worship means very specific things. And as we said before, what are we created to do? We are created to worship. We are created to bring honor or glory to the Lord. And so as we sort of what we call exegete this passage, we're going to go through kind of these verses that are there together, hopefully we'll come away with an understanding about this idea, understanding not only, whom we're worshiping, but how we worship, but also importantly that we make sure that we're not worshiping God in a false way. And so understand, this is not going to be a how-to worship that, you should throw your hands up or sit down or shout or whisper or be quiet. That's not what we're talking about in the components of worship, because worship is something that comes from the heart. Now, it's interesting when you go through the commandments, the Ten Commandments, but actually this is true of almost all the commandments in the Scriptures, you'll find three things that are almost always there when God is telling us something to do. You'll see something that's prohibited. You'll see something that is protected, and then something that's projected. I'll say that again. You'll see that when he's giving a command, usually there's something that is being prohibited. In our case, say the reason for our sin. There's something that's going to be protected because of our sin. The reason for maintaining our relationship is what God wants to do. Then something that's projected. Eternity, or what we have by enjoying a relationship with the Lord. And that's very true even in this passage. And if you apply those three things to all these commandments, it'll begin to make sense what he's trying to do in giving them. So as we look at this first one in verses 4 through 6, you can break this down into about 5 different things. And the first one is, what's the first phrase say? You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is heaven above, or that is the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. That's the first verse. And so what do you think that's saying? He hasn't mentioned worship yet. What's he commanding us to do? Don't make any images of anything. Don't make an image of something that, essentially, he breaks it down. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, meaning don't create something yourself, carving it or fashioning it in your own way, or any carved image, or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, meaning don't make something that looks like the sun or a rainbow or the clouds or something like that, the things that are in the heavens. The things on the earth below, which would be the animals and the mountains and stuff like that, or even the sea below, the fish or a whale or water or those sort of things. He's saying don't make anything that looks like that. Now, why does he say that? Why would God say that? What's wrong with having an ichthus, a fish that represents God? What's wrong with having this beautiful picture of a rainbow, because a rainbow is it not a promise of God's, caring for us, his covenant? Why does he say that? You're focused on a thing, okay? So he's saying don't make yourself a carved image, and one of these things are in the likeness of that. So it has something to do perhaps with what you're focused on. As we mentioned, images, this is the Image of Life serial. This is our image of God in a box. But does it really represent God? Can we put God in a box? No, we can't put God in a box. And in reality, by doing that, by trying to make something that simply we put our heads around that represents who God is, we have immediately limited God. We've immediately tried to put into our own finite minds what it is that we think about God. And God is much greater than that. He's much beyond that. So as soon as we try to do these things to create something, to carve something, to fashion something, to focus on something that is not really him, we have immediately put ourselves in a wrong place. We've actually limited who God is. Now remember, this is the people of Israel, and they were, they had come out of Egypt where there was all kinds of idols, and throughout the Old Testament you'll see time and time and time again, some of the greatest judgments that come on the people of Israel was because they had created these images. They had done these things. They had made something that they're going to worship. That is exactly right. We want, every person wants to worship something. We talked about that before. And it's much easier for us to worship something we can see, we can touch, we can put our hands on, we can kind of get even our minds around, because that gives us something to focus on. That's much easier than to worship this God who is, sort of out there, if you will, right? And so the problem with, as we create these things, this whole thing about image, think about your driver's license. What is, when you look at your driver, as soon as you get your driver's license, what's the first thing you do? You look at it, not to make sure the date's right, not to make sure that your address is right. You look at that picture and you say, oh my goodness, that is horrible. I've got to live with this for the rest until this is going to be renewed again, because now I have to show that to everybody. And this is the picture they're going to see. They're going to see that's what you look like. Maybe you're having a bad day. Maybe your hair's all tousled. Maybe sort of your eyes are half. Who knows? But that's the image that's there. And we want that image to be a right image. And God, in respect to him, yes, he wants us to, we are created in his image. But for us to then create an image, we just can't do it. And the problem with all these things that we make, all these things that we sort of put together, is the fact that just what you said, it's about focusing on something else and not him. See, the problem, the essence of idolatry is not the object that you're worshiping. It's the worshiper. If you have something that, whether it's a cross, this has happened in the church for many years, understand. Churches for in the early time when the church was developing, before people could read God's word, they made stained glass windows. They made beautiful things within the church, not to draw attention to themselves, but they were doing that as an expression of their gift. This is what they did well. They wanted stained glass because they wanted to bring glory to God. Because many times we're very quick to throw stones at people who have objects that are associated with worship. But the problem isn't the object. The problem is the person, if they're worshiping it or not. What is the focus? Where is it at? It's kind of an essence thing. There's a story of a guy who was in his building, and he noticed on the 43rd floor of his building there was a crack in the wall. And so he called an engineer up to the 43rd floor, and he said, listen, could you look at this? There's a crack in the wall, and it seems to be getting bigger. Engineer came up, he looked at the crack, and he got right back in the elevator and started down. Like I said, what's the matter? The problem's on the 43rd floor here. The problem is, we got to look at what the crack's coming from. It goes all the way to the basement. He says, no, you don't have a 43rd floor problem. You got a basement problem. And he takes him to the basement. He says, let me show you. Turns out that one of the caretakers had been taking one brick at a time from the basement to build his own house. And all of a sudden, that little bit of what was going on underneath was beginning to cause a crack in the 43rd floor. And so for us, that's many times the same thing we think about when it comes to idols or our worship. We think the problem is up here. We're looking at the wrong thing. No, the problem is we have a wrong heart. Where we're coming from, the heart behind why we're worshiping is all messed up. So his first command, the first part of this is he says, listen, don't make any of these images because you're never going to truly represent who God is. You can't put him in a box. What's the second thing he says to us?
Don't bow down to them.
You shall not bow down to them or serve them. And that's the whole thing. It depends, not the object, it's whether or not you're worshiping that object. Now, I think sometimes we have a hard time really understanding, do we have a problem with that? Because we would say we don't worship idols, we're not worshiping the Baals, we're not worshiping all of those things you see in the Old Testament. So we think we don't necessarily worship something else, but let's go back to defining what an idol is. What's the definition of an idol?
It takes more of your time, energy, or gifts before God.
Anything that takes time or energy more than that. What else? Any other definitions? Let me read one. Definition of idol is an image used as an object of worship. But then there's a second part to that when you read Webster's definition. It says one that is adored. Well, something to be adored has three different meanings. It can mean to worship with divine honor, which is what we're thinking about. But adored can also mean to love deeply or to like very much. All of a sudden, that changes things for us. We don't have a problem with the first one as far as, giving something, worshiping something with divine honor. We give that respect to God. But think about the things in our life that we love deeply, or the things in our life which we like very much. They have the potential of being idols depending on what we do with them, how or whether we worship them. Let's read the next phrase because they tie together. It says, you shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. Now, this is the one, again, we sort of play around with the phrase because jealousy has such negative, awful connotations. But why would God use that in context about being a jealous God? What is it rooted in? Anybody? It's rooted in love. Is love jealous? Well, it's rooted in relationship. That's exactly right. Jealousy's come as an example. Say a woman goes to a restaurant, and as she walks in the door of the restaurant, she sees her husband sitting there embracing another woman. Now, what do you think she's going to think? I think she's going to, her eyes are going to go up. What in the world's going on? And her husband says, wait, slow down. I don't want you to think the wrong thing. I was thinking of you the whole time I was embracing her. She just helps me remember how much I care for you. What do you think that woman's going to do? You better hope there's nothing big or heavy nearby. That's upside the head, because many times we do the same thing. When it comes to God, we have the same sort of idea that, you know what, we love God, but yet we're embracing other things. And God is a jealous God. He wants all of us. He wants absolute attention. He wants to be our one and only. You know, we talk about relationally, that word have, when you talk about have no other gods, is about having a wife, to having to hold, or having children. It's this very dynamic, ongoing, loving relationship. And so when it says he's a jealous God, he says, I am the Lord your God. I'm a jealous God, because he wants all of us. So back to this idea about worship and idols, all of those things that we have in our life that we embrace instead of him, he's not happy about. Now you may say, well, Dan, how do you really know what some of these things may be? What could it be to know, is it really an idol or not? I think you should ask yourself one of three questions. Or actually, let me ask you to complete one of these sentences, and this will answer for you what your idol is or could be. Lord, I'll give you anything but blank. Or Lord, I'll do anything but blank. Or Lord, I'll give you anything in my life but blank. Or you could have anything else in the world but blank. Whatever you put in that blank either is or potentially could be an idol. Now that's very, very hard, because the reality is we look at, Lord, you've done enough. Let me hold on to a little bit of something. And unfortunately, he says, no. I don't want you to hold on to anything but me. And so as we develop this idea about what he's saying is, I don't want you to make any graven images. I don't want you to create any other things. I don't want you to worship anything else but me, because I'm a jealous God. Once again, it's this plea he has with us. Listen, I want to be in relationship with you. I want to be in an exclusive relationship with you. Nobody else, nothing else, just you and me. That's all that really matters. But yet for us, we have 50 other things, because we don't like exclusivity. We like choices. We like to have other things. We like the variety of life. And it's not that he's not going to give that. Now this story, when you look in let's think about the Ten Commandments for a minute. What happened around the Ten Commandments? Somebody tell me the story. The Ten Commandments was Moses goes up to the mountain, right? The people of Israel are down the mountain. Moses goes up to the mountains, and God speaks to him, right? And he gives him these things that are written in stone. Who wrote them in stone? God did. First time, God did. So he's written these laws, and he says, listen, I want you to go down and share these laws with my people. What's going on with the people downstairs? Downstairs, that's down at the bottom of the hill. They're making a golden calf. You know, when you read again, book of Exodus, go to chapter 32. We won't go through it, but if you have some time, read through that story. Because what happened was they're sitting around waiting. Moses is up on the mountain. Moses has not come back yet. Their fearless leader who took them out of Egypt is no longer around, and they need something to do. And so they're crying out, and Aaron, his right-hand man, who's going to watch over things while he's away, instead of leading like he's supposed to lead him, completely caves into what they're saying, because they want to worship something. He says, hey, listen, take all the earrings out of your ears, bring it, all your gold, we'll melt it down, we'll make something. So they do. They make the golden calf. And so now they've got the golden calf. Now they have something to dance around and to worship and to have this feast, and something they can focus their attention on, because, number one, they can't wait to hear from God. They can't wait to hear from Moses, and they just want to worship something. They just want there's something to be in the middle they can do, so this is what they do. Think about that. These are the same people that were taken out of Egypt by miraculous things, parting the Red Sea, all that stuff. Same God who did that they're waiting to hear. They couldn't wait long enough for the guy to get down from the mountain. So, are we like that at all? Absolutely. We can't wait to hear from the Lord. You kidding me? I need an answer sooner than that. I'm just going to start doing my own thing. And Lord, you catch up and you intervene. If I'm doing the right thing, you just redirect me. I'm just going to start doing it. And all of a sudden, we start making these idols ourselves. We start creating these things that we will worship or we will build our lives around, because we just can't wait anymore. So then what happens? What happens to when obviously God knew what they did? What was God's response to them when they had decided to make the golden calf? He wants to destroy them. I'm just going to make these guys toast. I've had it. Here I am trying to give them these laws. I desire a relationship with them, and they're down making a golden calf. So what does Moses do? Moses says, wait, please, don't destroy them. You know, they're stupid. We're all stupid. We don't know what we're doing. Just kind of give us an understanding. So he goes down the mountain, and then Moses sees them, and what does Moses do? Mr. Composure. Are you kidding me? He gets mad. He throws the tablets, and he breaks the stone tablets that God has written on. And then they go through this. If you read the rest of the story, he calls people together. They kill some of them. It's a big old mess. And you say, okay, that was the Ten Commandments? That's these laws we're supposed to live by? What happens after that?
They got to wander 40 years in the wilderness, and they were only 2 months from their destination.
Have you ever been like that? You're driving the car. You don't realize you're almost there. You're a block away. But you just keep driving around, and you got to go somewhere else because you just couldn't wait, couldn't slow down long enough. Did it last night. Was in the car going over to Alan's house. Supposed to be watching the road. Cheryl even tells me, it's right up here on the left. I drive right by it. You know, why? Because I'm in a hurry to figure out what it is. I drove right by the road. So now I got to go down, turn around. That's our lives because we're just in such a hurry to figure it out. We just go beyond that. So you're right, they end up wandering. But then again, we're going to read in a couple minutes what happens in chapter 34 of the book of Exodus, because that's where the real story comes. But let's finish the last two things that he's saying about this commandment. Number one, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. What's the next thing he says? Visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. This is one of those phrases like, where did that come from? Because that does not seem like this God of love. What is it saying? It's saying that the third and fourth generation are going to pay the price for your sin? Does God judge our children for our sin? No. You sure about that? Okay. Then what's he saying here? Seems to me like if I read this, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me.
Because the consequences of our sins affect the relationships of our family.
Correct. God will not judge somebody else for my sin. He's going to judge me for my sin. However, the consequences of my sin may have an effect on my children, my family, for many generations. We're living through that right now, right? We are living through this time where our country has sort of set God on the shelf, forgot about God. God, who used to be the most important thing, just keeps going further and further down the ladder, and all of a sudden we're in this culture that knows nothing about him, cares nothing about him, and we're spinning out of control. But you know, what's one of the things in that phrase that's important there? It says, for those who what? Who hate me. Now that is a strong word. You know, granted, God is a black and white God. It is love and hate in many respects. Now, do you hate God? Do I think that Walter hates God? No. But you know what? Anything that is in enmity, if you will, against God means you hate him. You either love him or you hate him. Idolatry is evidence. Our relationship with something else, putting something else more important than him, is evidence that we really hate him. That's a very hard pill to swallow. Because we think, no, I don't hate him. I just like this a little more. God is an absolute. You either love him or you don't. Now, granted, we're sinful people. We're fleshly people. We don't do it 100% perfectly. We have to realize our imperfection, what we do, if it's not out of devotion to him, it means we hate him. He looks at that as, they don't love me, they hate me. Do you know what the best thing about this whole commandment is? The next phrase. What's the next phrase say? But showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. So on one hand, yes, there will be consequences of those who have not followed God, who have followed idols, cultures, nations, all that sort of stuff that is there. Yes, that will carry off to the third and fourth generations of those who don't care about God. But steadfast Not so, just showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. Again, remember what I said about a commandment? First, there's a prohibition. Listen, don't make any idols. Don't worship something you're not. Then there's also what happens because of that. What is he trying to protect? His relationship with us. As long as there's sin there, we can't be in right relationships. He wants to protect that. Then what's the projection? Listen, he's going to show steadfast love to thousands by those who obey us. Turn your Bibles to Exodus chapter 34. I'll just read quickly the first 10 verses because I think it sort of sums it all up in a really kind of dynamic way of God's promise in the midst of this. This is after they have, they made the golden calf. They actually destroyed the golden calf, ground the thing into dust, put it in the water, and made them drink it. You ever take your kids and make them drink? Yeah, well, It's sort of that saying that he made them drink the stuff that they're worshiping as a means of remembering. But then now they're at this point where here we go again. We're going to try this one more time. The Lord said to Moses, cut for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke. Be ready by the morning and come up in the morning to Mount Sinai and present yourself there to me on top of the mountain. No one shall come up with you, and let no one be seen throughout all the mountain. Let no flocks or herds graze opposite the mountain. So Moses cut 2 tablets of stone just like the first. And he rose early in the morning and went up on Mount Sinai as the Lord had commanded him. And he took in his hand 2 tablets of stone. The Lord descended in the cloud, and he stood with him there. And he proclaimed the name of the Lord. The Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and the children's children to the 3rd and 4th generation. And Moses quickly bowed his head toward the earth, and he worshipped. And he said, if now I have found favor in your sight, O Lord, please let the Lord go in the midst of us, for it is a stiff-necked people, and pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us for your inheritance. And he said, behold, this is God saying. And he said, behold, I am making a covenant before all your people. I will do marvels such as have not been created in all the earth or in any nation. And all the people among whom you are shall see the work of the Lord, for it is an awesome thing that I will do with you. I mean, that's just a great promise there. What's interesting is you see this is sort of the gospel in a nutshell. I love the scriptures because you can start in Genesis 1, you can go through every single book of the Bible, and you'll see the gospel sort of put down together in one sort of phrase over and over and over again. Here's a perfect example. What's happened? They've sinned. They've sinned, and they're, as a result of their sin, they're going before the God. And what does God do? Instead of destroying them, Moses comes up, and he descends in a cloud. And what happens with Moses? How does he tell Moses? Does he write it on the stones? He spoke it. Because I think one of the things that we suffer with most is the experience of God is in his voice. The experience of God is not in the singing, in the music, and all the stuff that we make peripherally about Christianity. The experience of God is in his voice. He spoke creation into being with a word. He walked and he talked with Adam and Eve. He talked with Moses and Abraham, and you look at the men of old, the great heroes of the faith, he spoke with them. And then Christ came and he walked on the earth and he talked with people. And he shared the word and he taught us and he gave us his word, words to live by. And then in the end, hanging on a cross, he spoke, "It is finished," in words. And in the end, there will come a day that it will all end with a shout in words. So many times our idols of worship are about other things, and it needs to be about words. Because his simply speaking the word changed things, and that's what happened with Moses. Moses is standing there, and he said, he proclaimed the Lord. And the Lord proclaimed to him, says, the Lord, the Lord, a God merciful and gracious. And he begins to describe in words who he is, an understanding, gracious, long-suffering, slow to anger, that he will forgive people of their sins. He will not spare those who sin. There will be a price to pay. But it's a story of the gospel, even to Moses there. He's going to forgive their sins, even though they've screwed up again, if they will simply just have a relationship. And what does Moses do? He bows down and he worships. And that should be our lives every single day. That we are somehow in some way bowing down, that the response of what God does in his speaking to us is worship. And as a result of that worship, then God comes in and gives a promise and he says, listen, I'm going to do things in your life or in your people that have never, ever been seen before. He used the term awesome things, beyond our belief. If we simply go back to basics, don't put them in a box, don't make it something that is creative, that makes us focus on something else. It's just about God and a relationship. A God who loves us enough, who is jealous enough to say, listen, I want you and you only. Let the experience of God be in his voice. Now, I understand sometimes that voice is very hard to hear because there's so many other people talking. Sometimes that voice is very small or very faint. Sometimes we don't hear it at all because it seems to be silent. But let me tell you, the experience of God is in his voice because he will speak to us in the very quiet times, in the most difficult times of our life. That's when you hear him loudest. It may seem like when we're going through such grave circumstances that we're surrounded by all the noise of everything that's going on, if you can just separate that in the stillness in the hardest times, that's when he screams. That's when he says to us, maybe it's a whisper, maybe it doesn't have to be a scream, but he speaks to us. Our problem, I use this phrase in my office all the time, I can help you hear, but I can't make you listen. And that's our problem. We may hear, but we don't listen. We don't heed the words that he's asking us to do. Listen, don't create these things that go in front of me. Listen, don't worship something else. Don't extend, your heart to something else that's not me, because I'm a jealous God. I want you. I'm telling you that. And if you do that, there will be a price to pay, not only for you, but for generations. But if you love me and you keep my commandments, steadfast. I love that phrase. Steadfast love to thousands, to generations, if we simply take that to heart. Once again, Christianity, the gospel, is a very simple thing that we make very, very complicated. God simply says, don't make any idols. None. Just me. That's it in a nutshell. But because that knowing that we even still will, he goes on and he realizes, listen, I'm wanting you to get rid of those things. It's back to a simple thing. Just you and me. Just our relationship, just me. And if you do that, just like Moses going up to the mountain and being there, and God descending on us in the midst of that, he will speak in a way that is so clear. And as you read on, it's even more. This time, Moses is writing on the tablets. There's a difference there. The second set of the Ten Commandments, Moses is writing there because God is empowering him to do something more because now things are right. Amen? It segues right into, as we think about communion. We're going to share communion here in a minute, and many times we take from, 1 Corinthians is the chapter we used to talk about the institution of the Lord's Supper, chapter 11. You know what happened in chapters 8, 9, and 10? Paul's giving them instruction about idols, destroying idols, offering food to idols, all of those things. Idols has so much to do with before we can come before the Lord and really celebrate what he did on the cross and in our lives. It's about getting rid of all that stuff. Now, only you can answer the question, Lord, I'll give you everything but what? And maybe before we do that, we should take a few minutes just in silence and really think about, Lord, is there anything there that I'm saying but, that you need to remove or I need to say is not more important than you? And in the midst of that, when you lay that down, destroy that, he's going to usher in and you will hear that still small voice, or you will hear that loud voice of reassurance that we need to know that says,
And my shame
You're my kid. You're my child. I did this on the cross for you.
Your presence